Anti-racism protests are taking place in Japan this weekend in protest of the Black Lives Matter campaign. And joining us now from Yokohama is Baye McNeil, who writes a column for the Japan Times called Black Eye, focusing on the experiences of black people living in Japan. And Baye, just tell us, what are the experiences of people like you in Japan?
Well, it's varied. It depends on your perspective on things. But I think I just want to talk a little bit about Black Lives Matter here in Japan and the protests that have been occurring recently. Last week, there was a protest in Osaka attended by maybe 1,000 people, and also another protest here in Tokyo area attended by over 3,000 or 4,000 people. So it's going very well. I'm hearing about protests upcoming in Kyoto, Fukuoka, also in I think there was a protest today in Kyoto, actually, and another protest in Hiroshima. So it's picking up momentum here, and that's great.
And so just tell us more about the extent of racism in Japan, because we've seen so many countries around the world in the wake of what happened in Minneapolis, countries really examining their consciences and talking about how they treat race as an issue. What is the experience there in Japan?
Well, I think many of Japanese people don't realize why Black Lives Matter is really an issue here, because many Japanese view this as a very homogenous country, which it is. But there's a long history of racism here in Japan, and it dates back to when Commodore Perry first opened Japan up to the West. And at that point, they introduced white supremacy as well as some racial stereotypes, because his shipmates, they also, well, the people on his ship, they performed in blackface for the Bafuku at that time. And this was when blackface was first introduced. These racist stereotypes were first introduced to Japan. And this has carried on from that point until today. So there has been a long history of racism in Japan, racial stereotypes, including recently, last week there on NHK, there was a program talking about the background of Black Lives Matter, and in that program there's an anime skit where some racist stereotypes were portrayed in explanation of Black Lives Matter. So there are some racial issues here in Japan, but I think that thanks to Black Lives Matter's raising these issues and giving people more information about Black Lives Matter and about racial problems here in Japan, some of them are going to be addressed.
And what would you say about the wave of protests we've seen across the United States and now right around the world, including Japan, as you've been talking about, in the light of what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis a few weeks ago? It really has been an extraordinary global phenomenon.
It has been. It really has been. And I think it's a result of Black people around the world are having similar experiences, and people are now taking notice of how negative and how detrimental these have been to the progress of people of African descent around the world. The diaspora, I would say that, like in the United States, also in the Caribbean and other Western countries, are having a very similar experience. You know, they have been on the bitter end, the business end of white supremacy and racism, and I think Black Lives Matter, these protests around the world are addressing these, and I think it's bringing to attention a lot of the problems like police brutality and unemployment, healthcare discrepancies, and these kind of things are being brought to the attention of the world, and that's great.
Yeah. Okay. Really good to talk to you, Baye McNeil, writer for the Japan Times. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.